Today I'll be reviewing 3 different movies at 3 different... That's the wrong series. Today I watched 3 different anime movies so that you don't have to. Wait, that's wrong as well. I got it. Today, a manga reader will review 3 different anime movies. So with that said, welcome to Manga Reader Reviews 3 different anime movies. As most people would know, I've done reviews of manga for the most part and recently for some games as well, but I've never done a review of any anime despite its popularity. The reason for that is quite simple and there's no deeper reason besides this, and that's simply put, I don't really like the medium of anime. However, over the past few weeks, I have watched a few anime movies, and so I shall be giving my opinions on these movies. But I guess people will be skeptical of the opinions of someone who mostly reads manga and doesn't watch anime to give an opinion on movies. So the truth is that before I started doing all this weird review business, I did study film for a bit in school before. So I did not study it for extremely long, and I'm not a specifically good movie buff or super good film critic or whatsoever, but I have enough knowledge of me to have a decent understanding of movies and films in general, especially stuff to look out for and things to talk about. So despite me not being the best person to be talking about animated films, I believe that I have some level of say in knowledge. So despite being mostly a manga reviewer, I would say that hear me out before you click off. So as usual, before we start, if you want to know more information about the movies and my full review on them, because I won't be covering everything in depth, I will have a review in the description below as per usual so that you can check that out instead. So to start things off, I will be going through each movie in terms of the chronological order in which I watched them. So we are going to start off with In This Corner of the World is the longest movie that I watched of the 3 movies, and its runtime is over 2 hours long. But despite it being over 2 hours long, there is in fact a longer extended version of this movie that I did not actually get to watch because I did not know it existed, so I'm actually missing out a bit of information of what the whole movie originally is supposed to be. And I regret it a lot, but I'm not going back to watch another 2 hours and 30 minutes for the extended cut to do a full in-depth review, because the 2-hour movie does give enough about the movie for me to talk about it. So I shall be going off the 2-hour version, though I would recommend you watch the 2-hour 30 version because it will probably be more accurate and showcase more of what the movie actually wants to portray. So about the movie itself, it takes place during World War II, right before the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, which would make this technically a war movie. So war movies / war films have actually been around for a very long time, but there are only 2 actual reasons why war films are actually created. The first is during wartime itself, and it's as propaganda to recruit able young-bodied men to join the workforce, because you never have enough soldiers and you want to just show off like, oh, look at the stuff that you can do when you join the army. Which is one of the less common forms of it, and you probably wouldn't see it commercially in the first place. And the second more common reason for war films, besides just pure commercial and entertainment purposes, is to show the effects of war and to dissuade people from supporting war efforts. And In This Corner of the World is one of the latter types of war films, as in it tries to dissuade people from accepting war. In This Corner of the World is actually a bit different. While traditional war films technically prefer to focus more on the war front, In This Corner of the World actually decides to focus more on the civilian side of things during wartime instead of the war fronts themselves, while also focusing more on the daily lifestyle of the Japanese during that period of time. As we actually know in World War II, if you studied a bit of history before, the Japanese were actually the ones who were on the offensive for the most part of the war, and because of this, a lot of the resources from Japan were actually allocated to the army instead of giving to the people. Furthermore, all the able-bodied men who were in the region itself were being sent out for war efforts, whether it be actually fighting at the war front or for more supportive work, while the remaining women and children had to get by with less resources and food and basically just wait out for the war to be over. Despite all this though, the remaining citizens who were left to stay in Japan itself continue to accept this new life as the norm, knowing that all the sacrifices would lead to the Japanese victory, and so they continue onwards with this. The main character, Suzu, is the perfect example of resilience and strength in the film, with the one who we see facing the most obstacles throughout the movie, from being married off to losing her freedom to draw, to causing her niece's death and losing her right arm. Yet, despite all this, she continues to live on and struggle in her own way to survive no matter the circumstances. All this had happened until the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, which was actually her original homeland. While most people would assume that with the dropping of the atomic bomb, it would show a more sadder tone for the people of the nation, especially marking their defeat and the waste of all the effort that has been done so far, it actually ends on a lot brighter note that you would have expected. Despite all the losses incurred from the war, especially the atomic bomb finally being dropped, the bomb being dropped also actually feels like it signaled the start of a new beginning. A new life without war, a life without needing to fear things wherever you go at any time of the day, a life where everything can technically be started again from zero. The movie actually does a really good job of showing how, despite everything that ended up being lost in the war, once everything was actually eventually over, life actually became better despite all the happenings that happened before. Which links back to the idea of war movies, which I talked about earlier. Like I said before, war is good for no one, and specifically focusing on not the soldiers this time but the citizens who bear an equal brunt of the suffering, and it's not really seen or understood as well as the war front. I think war movies are always timeless and show the mistakes that shouldn't be repeated from the past, and will always end up being relevant no matter what age we live in. Because even now, as you can tell from the actual world state right now, there are still wars taking place, and truth be told, it's really not helping anyone, and war movies always show a point as to why wars shouldn't really be done in the first place. In this respect, In This Corner of the World is a really good representation of a war film. I have not watched many, but it is definitely one that I can definitely relate to, and I think most people in general around the world who have learned just a bit of history can relate to this series, or at the very least learn a bit more about the Japanese side of things when it comes to World War II, and the people that especially have to live and deal with the aftermath of the atomic bomb, not far into the future, but the immediate effects of it. The next movie I watched was The Tunnel to Summer, The Exit of Goodbyes. I can say that this movie definitely felt like it was influenced by some other supernatural romance, but I won't go into too much detail about that. I think movies are very easy to split into two different categories, commercial and more artistic movies, and this is definitely one of the former. The movie is very carried by the visuals of the series, with many of the plot points not being touched on in the movie and the pacing being quite rushed in some parts. However, I don't exactly want to fully blame the movie for this rushness and lack of certain parts of the novel that it was adapted from, since the adapted light novel was actually a total of 6 volumes long, and to fully adapt that into a movie that's barely an hour and a half was just never going to happen. So I feel like the directors of the film and the movie did the best they could to fit all the important things into the movie, which is why you mostly see the main storyline and not really much of the subplot that is probably gone through in the light novel itself. Though because of this, the movie felt incomplete at times, as you see certain subplots that were supposed to have some story around it happening, but you don't really see the full extent of it and just see a slight portion of it, so it doesn't really feel completely fulfilling, and there are a few gaps at times because of this. In general, I don't really have much else more to say about it, because the fact is that a commercial movie is meant purely for the sake of entertainment for people, and for people to just in general be willing to pick it up without really too much thinking about it. So because of that, I would say that despite this being a slightly more interesting than usual romance movie to chill and not think too much about, it's not really anything spectacular, and definitely more of like a I'm bored and I just want to watch a movie, and you'll just pick this up and decide to watch it. I think one of the major issues with this movie is that compared to the other 2 movies that I've watched, it definitely feels the least complete and lacking at certain times, despite it being the newest movie and probably having the highest production value. Because of that, I can definitely say this movie is the most suitable for introducing to people who enjoy films but are not really into the anime space, as this is a really easy film to get into and is just pretty entertaining while not being too complicated or too niche in the sort of topics that it talks about as well. And with that movie out of the way, we are down to the last movie which I watched, which is Perfect Blue, and there's a lot to talk about with Perfect Blue. However, before we actually go into any more details about Perfect Blue, I would just like to start off by saying that Perfect Blue is a movie that can only exist as a movie, and in no other form, and not adapted into any other medium. And that's one of the highest forms of praise I can give it, because it will lose its entire existence as its movie and the intriguingness and the uniqueness of it if it was ever converted into another medium, which is why you actually don't see any other adaptation of it, because Perfect Blue is just such a unique piece of work that it can only exist as a movie, which is why Perfect Blue is actually one of the most interesting movies that I've watched out of the bunch, and I'll go into detail about it right now. Despite being the oldest movie of the rest of the movies that I've watched, the ideas that Perfect Blue uses and the way that the movie flows is extremely unique. One of the most interesting things about the movie is really the use of the deja vu scenes, bringing such a sense of eeriness to the movie while being so vital in the ending as well. It actually plays such an important role in the movie as to revealing the entire truth behind everything, and it's just a really small clue that would not make much sense until you finally reach the end of the series. So for the sake of not spoiling anything, I won't go into detail about what these scenes entail and what they really mean, but I cannot imagine this being translated into another medium, which is why these scenes are one of the ones that have stuck the most in my mind. One of the other more interesting things that I believe about Perfect Blue is that truthfully the intricacies of the movie can really only be truly understood after watching it a second time, after knowing the ending of the movie. The movie really does an excellent job of keeping certain information in the dark and continues to keep the audience guessing and wondering throughout the watch. The first watch of the movie really is to intrigue the audience, while the second watch is to unravel all the small clues that have been given along the way. That's the sort of movie that Perfect Blue is. It's so creepy, so eerie, it has so much mystery and intrigue to it that despite so many of the clues to the truth that is so obvious on the second watch, it's extremely hard to tell on the first watch, and a lot of the times you somehow struggle to figure out what really is happening, yet everything somehow becomes so much clearer. It's like muddied water becoming clean after watching it a second time. However, despite all the praises that I sing for how great Perfect Blue is, in the execution and the ideas that it uses for its time, I'll definitely say that it's not a series that everyone will be able to fully enjoy. It can definitely get overwhelming at certain points. The visuals are definitely jarring for more people who are more used to modern visuals, though I would say that despite the fact that it's quite old looking, I would say that if you enjoyed the movie enough, you would definitely start to forget about the visuals as much. While I definitely can't say that I would recommend this to all anime watchers as a good series, especially to more beginner watchers, I would say as a work of art and for people who just love really good movies, Perfect Blue is a really good example of creating a work specific to the medium, and it was really an eye-opening experience for me and really intrigued me a lot. The truth is, I never really knew that animated movies could get this good, and it really blew my mind when I watched Perfect Blue because it was just so interesting compared to what I expected anime movies to be like. So to summarize everything, all the movies I talked about are actually good movies, but each have their own unique quirks that make them stand out from each other. In This Corner of the World is a movie that talks more about the reality of the world and tries to share knowledge to people, especially about war. Meanwhile, The Tunnel to Summer, The Exit of Goodbyes is more of a neutral movie that's easier for people, whether anime fans or not, will be able to watch, focusing on being more entertaining and mostly of commercial value. Meanwhile, Perfect Blue is a beautiful movie that's novel and is closer to feeling like an experimental art than simply a movie, but might be polarizing because of its age, as well as the complexity of the themes that are talked about, as well as the story itself. In the end, I think that all the movies are really great watches, though some people would definitely gravitate towards one more than the other. While I don't usually watch movies, whether Western or Asian or whatever movies in general, it was definitely fun to watch movies yet again after not having watched them for a few years already. Especially Perfect Blue, which spoke to my film study instincts extremely naturally due to so many intricacies that you could really delve into the details of it. While I might not watch any more movies after this, at least in the near future, it was definitely an eye-opening experience, and I hope everyone is able to enjoy watching these movies as well. And I would definitely recommend to watch some of these movies because they are really all really good in what they do. So With that said, that's the end of the review. I don't have anything else to say. If you want to read a few review of each of these movies, I'll have the review in the description as always. And until next time, goodbye!